I was the kid that your parents would say, don't ever hang out with her. If I ever see you hanging out with her, you're grounded forever. My story with God, I guess, really began when I was a kid. I remember my grandma taking me to church, and I would just feel God's presence, and he would talk to me, and it was awesome. And I would ask him questions, little kid questions like why the grass was green or the sky blue. And he was real to me. But when I was six years old, my uncle, I started being abused by him sexually, and I was sold to different guys as well. And that went on till I was 14 years old. No one knew, but everyone I talked to, my cousins, my uncle, all the men that I was sold to, they led me to believe that it was kind of normal, that all kids grow up being raped and beat and tortured and just belittled. I was homeschooled my whole life. When I was 14, I was put into a Christian school. That's when I started realizing that other people don't go through the things I go through. And I was really, really angry. And teachers began to notice something was really different with me because I would come to school with bruises, or I would come to school and not talk. I always had long sleeves. They would notice self-harming cuts on my arms, and they would notice that I didn't talk with other kids, and I ended up being taken out of my home and put into a behavioral center. And it was there that they found that I had written hate on my arm with a razor blade and Jesus who on my thighs, and I would burn Bibles, and they really began to realize that something was really, really wrong with me and that I wasn't like other kids. So I ended up coming forward and telling what was happening to me with my uncle and the other men. And I began a long process of opening cases in different counties where I was raped in. Cops got involved. The school found out. My parents found out. It was this big deal in the community. And then there was me, and I was still angry, especially with God. So from there, at 14, I ran away from home. I joined a gang. I started selling drugs and just lived this crazy life. I robbed people and in and out of trouble with the law. I would get stopped. I would sell cocaine, do cocaine, just try to commit suicide, all this craziness. And meanwhile, living this life where I would talk to God just to tell him that I didn't like him and that I didn't want any help. I was happy where I was at. I liked being high. Just leave me alone. But when I was 17, my counselor, who I had been seeing since I was 14 years old, told me I should do martial arts because she thought it would help me with my anger problem. So I kicked over a table and I was like, I'm not angry, but clearly I was. So I ended up going to martial arts class, and I walk in, and the first thing I see is this Puerto Rican guy, and he looks at me and he sees that I have a stab wound in my hand from the night before. And he's like, hey, that's a stab wound. And I'm like, being hardcore, I'm 17, I'm like short haircut, I look like a guy, baggy, you can see my boxers. I'm like, nah, I just fell. And he's like, I'm from the Bronx, New York. I know a stab wound when I see it. And I'm like, okay, this guy's cool. Rick, the instructor of the dojo, and his wife were Christians, and they began to preach the gospel to me. And after every time I would go and practice, I'd come off the mat and they would just pray over me, and they would talk to me about Jesus. And one night, I was 17, I was on the dojo mat after practicing, and Elena, his wife, looked at me, and I saw this light in her eyes. And so I asked her, I was like, so what's this light I see? And she's like, it's Jesus. Do you want to know him? And in my head, I was like, I get stabbed almost every week. I've had guns to my head. I've been shot at. Police come in with guns in your house and shove your head into the carpet, and you watch your friends OD, you watch people die, you watch people get shot, and you're like, and I remember feeling like, what's the point, And if there is a point, then maybe this is it. and maybe I'm missing it because I'm just not trying it. And so on that mat at 17, I was just like, you know, why not? Why not give God a chance? And so when I accepted and said the prayer, you know, that Jesus, come into my heart, take away my sin prayer, as I repeated after her, I really kind of felt this load off of me. And I remember thinking, I can do this. I can walk away from all this craziness. I can become something. I don't have to die like all my brothers. I don't have to sell drugs till my teeth fell out and do meth and end up in prison like some statistic. I could do something good. And in that moment, I guess the presence of God really came over me. And it's been hard, like it's not been easy. I fell back into it and I got back out of it. I fell back into it, I got back out of it. But since then, I've kind of had this real overview that God's presence is really all you need, and His grace is sufficient, and just He is with you at all times, even back then when I was a crazy kid. God's really just been there and broken me, in a good way, broken me, and really taken all that pain and been able to use it for something good. And I think that really shows throughout my entire story is God's grace and favor, and that no matter what you've done or where you've been, that He's a good God, you know?